Hi, I'm Mrs. Clark, and I'm going to read A Fugitive is Captured. Scholastic has given me the right to read this to you out loud online. Bert ventured a few feet down the path, but then raced back to Laura and pulled her into the cellar. There's someone out there in a boat, he cautioned. They can't see us with all those bushes, Laura pointed out. I suppose you're right, Bert conceded, but I'll be in trouble with Paul and Joel if the slave catchers find out about this place because of me. Paul never told me where he took the runaways. Guess he didn't think I could keep still about it. I think Paul wanted to keep you safe. It's dangerous business, you know. Anyway, she consoled, Joel must have trusted you, or he wouldn't have sent that note. Bert's face brightened, but he said only he was desperate. Laura crossed the narrow cellar, crouched beside the pool, and scooped up a handful of water. It was clear and cold. She tasted it and found it good. A slave could stay here a long time, she remarked. Do you suppose Amos Tryon built these cellars on purpose to hide the fugitives? Bert shook the ladder, testing its strength. Course not. Probably he planned to use this cellar for his spring house. Butter and milk would keep well in that cold water. Laura began to see the possibilities of the riverbank cellars. One could be a laundry room. They could pipe the water up from the spring, and another could be a wine cellar. She gazed around the small room where they stood. I guess if these cellars had been planned for the slaves, there'd be some secret hiding places down here. I don't see any place where a slave could get out of sight if the slave catchers came around. Bert agreed. It was too easy for us to find our way through the cellars, he sighed. I guess no place is perfect. At least this is hidden from the road, and it's on the river. Laura stepped outside again and gazed up at the steep banks on either side of the house. The cellars certainly are the best way to reach the river. A person could climb down the bank, but it would be dangerous. Bert started up the ladder. Let's go home. Martin will be worried. When they emerged from the house, the sun was still bright, though it was low in the sky. Bert paused only to blow out the lantern before they took the path through the woods. I wish you didn't have to come back tonight, Laura worried. I know I'd hate to come through here in the dark. Maybe Joel will come and I won't have to take Martin. You'd be disappointed if you couldn't go, she challenged him. Maybe I would at that. I think you and Joel and Paul aren't in this underground railroad just because of the slave. It's an adventure. Bert glanced back over his shoulder. You wouldn't understand. Paul says a man's conscience is stronger than the law, and he says laws can be bad, like the fugitive slave law. Do you know that law says a slave catcher can swear any black he finds is the fugitive he's looking for, and the black hasn't any right to speak for himself? He pushed on down the lane, muttering, That old Henry Clay, he's to blame for getting the law passed. Laura thought of pointing out that Henry Clay wasn't the only person to blame, but rather than get into an argument, she changed the subject. I suppose Martin couldn't find this place alone. Of course he couldn't, in the dark, and it wouldn't be safe for him to be wandering around. The minute anyone saw him, they'd know who he was. Sally whinnied her pleasure at seeing Laura and Bert again. Laura ran ahead to see if anyone was on the road, while Bert backed the carriage down the narrow lane. The leaves rustled under her feet, making, she felt, too much noise. And what would anyone think seeing her burst forth from the woods with her hair flying and her bonnet hanging down her back? Slowing her pace, she slipped into the denser shadow of a pine tree. Here she stood motionless, listening for the sound of hooves or wagon wheels on the river road. All she heard was the creak and rustle of their own carriage on the lane, and Sally's snort of protest at being forced to back so far. Encouraged, she peered around the tree and finally emerged boldly onto the edge of the road. No one was in sight. She ran back to Bert. Hurry, the road's clear. Remembering how she had removed their tracks on the way to Tryon's Folly, she snatched up a branch, and as soon as the carriage was again on the road, she whisked out the tracks at the entrance to the lane. Jump in, Bert urged. No telling when someone will come along. They had been underway only in a minute or two and were approaching Judge Stowe's house when a horse and rider pounded toward them. That was close, murmured Bert. The rider slowed his horse and shouted to them. They caught a slave in Lewiston. I'm rounding up help to set him free. Good, shouted Bert. When the rider had gone on, Laura asked fearfully, Do you think it's Martin? Bert slipped the reins.